This is nothing but that sports talk. Were you ahead of the game?
Welcome to Nothing But That Sports Talk. The NBA playoffs, along with the WNBA season, is literally heating up. And yeah, we got Aya and Brandon Scoopy Robinson, the legend of journalism, right here, along and meeting up with the upcoming journalist herself. It is just going to be a crazy combo. Brendan, tell us a little bit about why you started your journalism career and how you started.
First of all, thank you for having me on. I have been seeing your work and seeing what you're doing, and I understand that Aya is getting ready to go to school. So glad to connect with you guys and answer to your question. My interest in kind of just basketball really started in Harlem. My family owned a sneaker store and a shoe store on 125th Street, and I grew up being around a lot of athletes and entertainers. And them shopping in the store, them having a good relationship with, my uncle, the late Paul Mooney, and my uncle had a very good relationship, and they would often laugh and joke in the store. And Mike Tyson would shop, the Wayans brothers, so Dizzy Gillespie. So I would see that, like sneaker releases with like Dominique Wilkins and Spud Webb and all those other folks. And I kind of just got comfortable around athletes and the combination of that and, being around citywide basketball. My uncle was a commissioner of parks at Riverbank State Park. So I would see a lot of that, just a lot of athletes coming in and out of there. And, when I was 12, I had a radio show with the Nets when they were in New Jersey, and I did it for 2 seasons, co-hosted it with Evan Roberts and Albert King and, some of those other folks. And, that was really what my first professional, connection to the game. I've always loved it. And I fell in love with the 91 Bulls. My stepdad's from Chicago. So I used to watch Michael and Scotty and Horace Grant and all those people. So I've always loved the culture, but the business side of it, is a formality as well.
Wow. Only you would love the Michael Jordan era. All the way up until his comparison with LeBron James, who finally lost in the first round. I know a lot of LeBron haters is happy about that. But you know what? This man has won so many first round series, but we're going to get that a little bit later. Why don't you talk about your favorite moments during your journalism career up until this point?
I'm still having them. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm still young. I think that genuinely storytelling and really how I build it is different than most. While I had an early start, at one point I freelanced at about 10 to 13 different publications from like 20, I want to say like when I graduated grad school in 2011, from like 2012 to like 2015, 2016. I mean, I was at Brooklyn Courier, Queens Times Ledger, and then in New Jersey, like the East Orange Record, the West Orange Chronicle, Madame Noir, and really, just the journey. I think looking back the last 10 years, I really appreciate. I was writing at the Source magazine for free, but it gave me access to different places. And press conferences. I was at the Adam Silver press conference when he banned Donald Sterling for life and got a question in. And I think that when you look back over the last 10 years, I think the ride or the journey has been the most fun. I still have not arrived, but I appreciate those humble beginnings, paying your own way, funding what you want to do, and then ultimately starting Scoop B Radio, my podcast, which garners 3 to 5 million streams annually. We've had anyone from the voice of Siri to DJ Khaled to Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, a myriad of those other people. But, basically building your own brand and your infrastructure. I think over the last 10 years, I've been kind of nostalgic. I've been like in my office shredding papers from like the last 10 years. So you look like invoices and you're sending stuff to publications to get stuff done. I think you look back at those times and you're nostalgic and you're retrospective and you appreciate it because, I was once you guys as you guys are building your journey on the way up and making things happen. So I appreciate the last 10 years of my life, and I'm still growing.
Yes, I know. And I appreciate you watching all your interviews you've done with NBA players, former NBA players, even actors. And yeah, you've done everything, not just in sports, but in entertainment. Sure. And I see you in so many platforms, from the Real Lil Show, Real Fans Will Talk. You appeared in so many, you interviewed so many. Now you're on Bally Sports what is that like for you working at Valley Sports up until this point?
It's cool. I'll tell you, I left heavy.com back in like January, February. Was there for 2.5 years, and appreciated my time there, breaking stories, writing features, and more. And what I'll say is, that interview process to get to head over to Bally's was a strenuous one. It's about a month long of an interview process, and I appreciate it. But I'll tell you something: as much as I enjoy my time at Bally, what I like about it, one, is that it was a perfect fit from what I was already doing. Two, I had some time in between my former place of employment to now to kind of like take a break. I feel like COVID over the last year, just us being bored in the house and in the house bored has been such a grind. And I think I'm appreciative that before I started my new role, I had kind of time to decompress. I think that's so important. I think we glamorize our industry and the hard work that it takes, but we don't. But I think in an era where mental health is so important, you have to have time to kind of like enjoy the moment, think about next steps, but also plot next steps, and also think about the journey. As I've told you, I'm retrospective about over the last 10 years. Valley Sports is a great opportunity. I'm thankful it's a national look, but I'm even more thankful that I've been able to kind of enjoy it and prepare as I'm walking into a dream job situation, which I'm thankful for. I think in this industry, there's room for a lot of different people to shine. And I think it's all about finding your niche, finding what you're comfortable with, what you're interested in, and getting reps. And I think right now, digitally, particularly while we're all in the house with Zoom and Instagram Live and just some of these other things, it gives you the opportunity to, reach out and touch anybody and to build content and to, continue to, like, you don't have to graduate college to start. I feel like you start while you're in it. You finish how you start.
Honestly, like, I remembered when I was writing for WNBA Belly Up Sports and then Beyond Women's Sports before I have to take a year off for my senior year because I had to focus on the big project, which is the senior thesis. The senior thesis was one of the hardest things I completed, but thankfully I passed because I turned in all the things on time. And then
what was your
after the thesis defense, which is I wrote on the stages of romance and love.
Nice.
And that would have helped me prepare for college and sports journalism in general.
Ultimate. That's the ultimate goal. I think that's crazy. You're in high school and you're writing a senior thesis. I didn't write one until I was a senior in college. They're doing thesis.
Oh my God.
In high school now. That's crazy.
Yeah. Basic writing is what really helps you get a job in journalism or helps you get one step closer to the journalism field. And Brandon, you've done so much. I've read some of your articles. There was good storytelling behind your career to journalism. You connected with so many people, and yeah, that's all we can really say. And this is just pretty much a taste of what you're going to have to deal with when you finally start your college journey at Arizona State, Aya.
Yep. And just like going into one of the best journalism schools in the country, which is really like a good privilege for me. Like impressed with myself for working this hard and getting to where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Okay, now let's talk some NBA playoffs as you saw what's been going on. But
yeah, with the fan interactions, I'm just like,
but
I have no words.
What's the most disappointing that's happened in the playoffs? The Knicks losing in the first round, the fan behavior, or LeBron losing in the first round?
I think that the fan behavior appears to be ridiculous in the first round because, like they've been out for like over a year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then like when one of the fans threw popcorn on Russell Westbrook while he was injured, and then another incident where a fan who was sitting on courtside spit on Trae Young, leading to the Hawks eliminating the Knicks in the first round. And then they banned him. Not only they should ban him, they should like press him with charges. I'm like, I don't get why the fans are getting this crazy during the NBA playoffs. Wow, they were while the NBA fills games with full capacity.
Well, I think you look at the fan interaction. Last week there were about 5 incidents of
Yeah, like 5.
yeah. So you had the incident in Utah with John Moran's family. You had the popcorn incident, as you mentioned, with Russell Westbrook. You had the spitting incident that you also mentioned, Aya, with and Madison Square Garden with the fans. And then you also had the fan running onto the court in Washington, D.C.
My God.
And then, of course, you had the fan throwing the water bottle at Kyrie Irving as he was heading back through the tunnel. I think these are incidences where I find a couple of things. I find a couple of common themes. One, I think many folks have been stir crazy having sat in the house for over a year.
Yeah, like I was pointing out.
And I also believe that many fans, almost like, I'll use this example. So many times when you watch characters in a movie or on television, many people can't separate the character that they play from who they are in real life if they see them in real life. And so I think that, yeah, you pay money for a ticket to sit into the arena, but that doesn't give you the right to put hands on, to assault and more. And I think what happens is you have to be able to separate the player from who the person is in real life. If I can use an example, it's kind of like the difference between the wrestler and who he plays as his role in WWE or AEW or WCW versus who they are off camera. And I think that many people see celebrities as not as people, but as multi-million-dollar people or just characters. And respect is still a two-way street. Just like the players don't have the right unprovoked to go into the stands and slap a fan, fans don't have a right to put hands on and just void common decency.
Yeah. And then let me just say, so for the fan who threw a water bottle at Kyrie Irving brought up the example of how racism is being defined, like in a league where there is a lot of okay, I'm so sorry, I got really confused. So Kyrie Irving, when he brought up the example of how the fan who threw the water bottle at him, Cole Buckley, is the name of the fan who threw a water bottle at Kyrie Irving, is considered as an example of racism. And Kyrie Irving said that the fans need to grow up and move on. And then like what you said, Brandon, about how they spend this much money just to like get ejected and banned from NBA games for life, which is really absurd and really like offensive to the players. Sorry, I got confused on that.
No, you're fine. I think what you were talking about was Kevin Durant saying grow up, and he was saying,
oh, my bad.
But it's fine, because what happens is there's so many storylines. Just like I think when you looked at that game against the between the Celtics and the Nets, you have to exclude the Kyrie Irving stomping on or rubbing his foot on the Celtics logo is mutually exclusive from the fan throwing a water bottle at Kyrie Irving. People try to group those things together. In my opinion, I think they're two separate issues.
Yeah.
I think people are just so overly exposed to media all the time that you meld things together as one. And sometimes what the issue is, it often gets lost in translation. So
honestly, what I was thinking is when Kyrie Irving, when he was talking to the media after Game 4 of the first round between the Nets and the Celtics, when he brought up the example of how racism has been the issue in the last few years, I think like the way how Kyrie Irving brought up this this issue of racism,
sure.
I think like they need to like find a way to make sure racism is not being issued anymore. Like it's been a problem for the last few years.
Well, I think racism I feel what you're saying. I think racism is something that has been going on before we were even born. But I think having a conversation like we're having now is definitely a good place to start. But I think why racism is such an important discussion right now is because of what happened last year, particularly as it
I
relates
noticed
to
about
George
that.
Floyd. Yes, especially what happened with George Floyd, particularly what's happened with other cases of police brutality with other civilians. But what I'll say is basketball is the vehicle, or sports is the vehicle that brings everyone together. So when you have issues like the bubble, where players last year were discussing whether or not there should be an actual series of games in Florida, many athletes felt, particularly African Americans, felt that by kind of not playing, it would raise awareness for fans who will say, well, what are they trying to teach in this moment? Do they have the moment? In the same token, a lot of players feel like because the owners would be so regretful that they would lose so much money from not playing, they had to find a way to make it right. So for a lot of folks, a lot of players, they got the attention of owners after what happened in Kenosha in Wisconsin, where voting centers and voting polls were paid attention to, because there's issues with voting where people's voices aren't being heard, particularly in inner city communities where, people don't have the opportunity, whether they're shooed away by poll workers or intimidated and things of that sort. So players were using their voices in that platform to bring awareness to a level of disenfranchisement. So I think sometimes, again, buzzwords like racism, words like systemic racism, buzzwords like oppression, they have to be put in a proper context because we're talking about it. Now it's a matter of, okay, you have crayons, markers, scissors, all on the table. Now we have to organize them in cups, right? Now you got to organize them in a manner so that we can educate ourselves.
Like using their voice, like using their voice. And then I was going to bring up, like, how the WNBA brought together this documentary, which is called 144, indicating that how many players were in this league last year, like 12 teams, 12 players per roster. And then they brought up together about how they would postpone the games due to the wake of Kenosha shooting. And then that brings them awareness and the voices together for like how things are bigger than basketball. And that what it matters.
You on to something. I like you. You on to something. I respect that. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, that is also true. And not to mention the fact that between the documentary you just talked about and the issues that we just said, these are like, what's the point of performing in the basketball court or in the football field? So if we're going to have issues like that go around, not just on the court, but off the court, it makes it scared to actually walk on the court now. This is one of those reasons why when the Jacob Blake shooting happened, they had to stop for a few days.
Yep.
Yeah.
People need to.
And then I saw like this coverage. Oh, sorry. And then I saw this coverage from the documentary, which was organized by Chiney Ogumike, about how they would have this meeting about like either playing or not, and then how they would bring up their voices and how they would be aware, so they can like make sure that the fans understand that they want to make sure that they can bring up their voices and the honesty about what is going on in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, and then how they dedicate the season in the bubble last year to justice, to social justice. And then for the WNBA, they had players like Natasha Cloud and Lorraine Montgomery sitting out to like step up in social justice.
Yeah, I think when you did, I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to say this.
It's okay.
But when you look at the 60s and the 70s with athletes like the Alis, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, I think in the 90s, that level of social activism from athletes was kind of lost. There was more money and the level of suppression because there was more money and just being more conscious of brands and what's being said. And I think when you look at the grand scheme now, I think athletes, I think actors, I think rappers have become the modern day social justice figures in the same way that Dr. King or Nelson Mandela or Malcolm X or just some of those other figures have had that baton has been passed. And I think every athlete does not have to be a social activist. I think that that's what you have to be careful of. Every player is not the voice of all African American thought process, but I do think that there's a responsibility if you have people who watch you to be vocal in the best way that you know how. And I think that a lot of athletes like Kyrie Irving, Tobias Harris, and others have been pretty outspoken about injustices and invoking change.
That is also true. This is just one of those serious situations that we just can't get past, including the fan behavior discussion that we had earlier. There's no getting past that. As much as you want to enjoy the first round, there's no getting past everything that's been going on outside. It's pretty much the same issue that we've had in the bubble last year. How can we enjoy sports when people don't want to act outside of it?
Yeah.
It's also true. Now, to get on to another interesting topic, like, what are the most impressive first-round matchups that you've seen so far in this year's playoffs?
I enjoyed Atlanta and New York. I think that
I did too.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Nets, when you look at the Knicks and you look at the Hawks, the exact same record, but a higher seeding. And, I think the Knicks had a heck of a season on a shoestring budget. And I think it's nothing to turn your nose up at that they lost, because I think that New York will definitely be an attractive destination in the free agency market this offseason for, the few that are, top ranked free agents. But I'll tell you this, I think that when you look at that series, it was a coming of age for Trae Young, but it's not just Trae Young. Their supporting cast of Clint Capella, John Collins, Danilo Gallinari, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Kevin Huerter, definitely, as well as Lou Williams, definitely were as billed. I definitely think that that matchup was impressive. I'll also add, the Mavericks and Clippers series.
Game 7 is going on right now for Mavericks and Clippers.
As we're talking now, this is a series that's going Game 7, and no home team has won in this series. And, I definitely like that series. And I'll add, when I look at first rounds, I like the Sun series with the Lakers. And I think what gets lost in translation is that, because I know, Rafiq, you asked me a question about, LeBron and the Lakers being out of round one. The Suns won that series fair and square. Whether or not Anthony Davis was out didn't really make a difference. The Suns had a heck of a season this year. They legitimately have a candidate for head, front office or executive of the year, and James, as well as head coach of the
Monty
year.
Williams
and Monty Williams. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I definitely think that series was good, and Devin Booker has come of age. 47 points here, 34 points here, 30 points there. And Chris Paul, you can't speak enough about his leadership. So I'm glad that the Suns are getting they're just due. The Denver Nuggets as well have been playing good basketball without Jamal Murray.
I've been a Suns fan. Since I don't know when, but seeing the Suns team grow from a 1963 record 2 years ago to having the second best record in the NBA, which is really huge, and defeating the defending champs in the first round, which really surprised me because most of the experts of ESPN had Lakers winning over the Suns in the first round, and then Devin Booker just had his first year playing in the playoffs, in which he sparked the light as a star, as a shining star in the NBA. And then LeBron James respected that by giving an autographed jersey to Devin Booker after the game, which is it's heartwarming for all the NBA fans around. And then especially I noticed how LeBron bandwagon fans would blame on I have no clue, but other than that, Lakers versus Suns was a really good series, and I respect the Lakers for fighting hard and giving them their all. And then what you were saying, Brandon, about the Knicks versus Atlanta, let me just tell you about this. In Game 2, where the Knicks won at the Madison Square Garden Arena, where one Knicks fan who was wearing a Julius Randle jersey spat on Trae Young, and then he was automatically banned from the arena since then. Trae Young, in the next 3 games, gone off, scoring 30+ points on the Knicks, and then in Game 5, he took a bow. As the Knicks fans were giving the Knicks praise for the fight, and then Trae Young. I'm so sorry, I'm confused on that, but for Trae Young, what he's saying about the spitting incident, which is pretty fascinating, and it's really interesting to see how Trae Young and Clint Capella made made an impact for this Hawks team since Nate McMillan taking over as a head coach.
Yeah, you're on to something. You know what you're talking about. You look at Clint Capella, and Clint Capella, was one of the league leaders in rebounds this year. He's averaging 1.3 to 1.4 blocks per contest. But then also, you look at the last couple of games, he and John Collins. I think John Collins had a string of 20 or more points in the last 2 or 3 games in that series, I believe. But I'll add that when you look at just that series overall, the Hawks have been endurers, if you will. Nate McMillan, they need to take that interim head coach tag off of his name that season's end whenever their season ends. They squeaked past Philly. They had about a 20 to 25 point lead in Game 1 in the playoffs, but in round 2. But overall, the Hawks have played good basketball. It's not a foregone conclusion that either the Sixers or the Nets will go to the conference finals. The Bucks, even though they lost Game 1, Game 2 is Monday. I think that the Nets and the Sixers overall have been the best 2 teams in the Eastern Conference, and I think it's easy to overlook a team like the Hawks, who fired Lloyd Pierce at the All-Star break and brought in Nate McMillan. You even look at that trade that the Hawks made with the Clippers to bring in Lou Williams. They needed veteran leadership, and it worked out for both teams, for the Clippers and for the Hawks. And definitely a lot to dissect there in round 1, Rafiq. I'm sure you're excited for round 2.
Yes,
I'm excited for round 2.
Especially after what I saw earlier today with the Hawks winning Game 1. This has the potential to be an upset for Atlanta Hawks getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, because Trae Young's balling out of his mind. He's getting other guys that can shoot threes involved. Danilo Gallinari, he's not where he was when he started, but he's still being useful. Oh yeah, you mentioned Lou Williams. This team has the potential to have a deep run in the playoffs. Who would have thought we'd be talking about Atlanta going to the conference finals after winning Game 1?
I had a feeling that the Hawks would go to the Eastern Conference Finals. I know they won Game 1 over this hard-fought Sixers team today, which they've been looking for competition in the last few years, and how they've been trusting the process. This Hawks team led by Trae Young, since he came in the 2018 NBA draft. Sorry, I got a mispointing out here. When the Mavericks made a trade with the Hawks, could this for the Hawks, how Trae Young made this impact for scoring, which is pretty impressive by a leader that is under 25 years old.
Definitely. He's been preparing for the big stage for a long time.
Yeah. And then speaking of Game 7 of the Clippers versus Mavericks, the Clippers are leading 100-85 over the Mavericks. They expected it to be a competition, but now for Clippers, led by Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, they're expected to I have no idea, but
really stepping up. Hopefully we don't see another mediocre end to the Clippers like we did last year when they blew a 3-1 lead against Denver. Talk about mediocre.
That led to Doc Rivers becoming a head coach for the 76ers, and then Ty Lue is a head coach for the Clippers. A lot of crazy things have happened since then.
I think we move on. Well, what's your predictions between the Bucks and the Nets series? Do you see Brooklyn winning this series?
I do. I see it going 6 or 7 games in order to do it. Milwaukee will definitely make some adjustments. James Harden will not play in Game 2. But the Nets, prepared well. In spite of that, Blake Griffin was big in Game 1. 18 points, 14 rebounds, I believe, in Game 1. and you saw a good showing from Bruce Brown as well as Mike James. The Nets have the supporting cast I see in game 2. Nick Claxton stepping up some more in the interior because I don't see this being another blowout game like it was in game 1 for Brooklyn. But I think game 1 is always a fill-out game. And, it's going to have a lot of ups and downs. I don't see it being sweet. I see it going 6 or 7 games.
Okay.
And then the fact is, the 2020 NBA Finals teams that were there, the Miami Heat and Los Angeles Lakers, did not make it past the first round of the NBA playoffs. Mm-hmm. And then there's a first time since 2010 where there wouldn't be a finals without LeBron James or Stephen Curry, which states that there's a new era in the NBA. There is. That's
an interesting fact because that means outside the Brooklyn Nets and the 76ers and the Milwaukee Bucks, almost anybody can be champion.
Yeah.
Anybody.
Anything is possible out here.
For sure.
Yep, as KG's always said, anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on to predictions for the Atlanta Hawks and Sixers. Do you see the Sixers turn things around and win this series, or will Atlanta get past them and we get to the conference finals?
I'm like 50-50 on that. Out of Joel Embiid, he just came back from like a minor injury. He missed the game where the Sixers clinched the series over the Wizards. And then and then for the Atlanta Hawks, how Trae Young and his supporting cast, like you were saying, Brandon, is making an impact for this Hawks team. There can be anything that is happening between the Hawks or the Sixers making the Eastern Conference Finals, and I can see one of them making it.
Yeah, I definitely see your point of view, and I think that as far as game 1, like I mentioned about the Nets and the Bucks, game 1 is always a fill-out game. Even looking at games throughout the last 10, 15 years LeBron James has played in the playoffs, game 1 is usually a fill-out game. You're trying to, one thing to see, a team. It's one thing to see a team and watch video from the last series. It's another thing to go toe-to-toe with them and then having video against the team and, you go back in the lab and you figure out what's what. But I think when you look at game 1, I think there was a lot of just jitters about whether or not Embiid would play and how he would fit and how his health would hold up. He averaged over 30 points in the first game. And, when you look at game 2, when you look at after game 1, they'll go back and they'll kind of fix some things. The Sixers came down from 20 points. You can't play hero ball and expect to win the game. If I were the Sixers, I'd be kind of disappointed, that you were down like 8, down 3 and more. And but I ultimately think that when it's all said and done, this will be a series. Trae Young is good. Huerter's good. Lou Williams is good, but I think ultimately it comes down to kind of get back in the lab and fixing some things. I didn't look at the stat sheet, but I would imagine turnovers were a big issue. But also the Hawks came out swinging. The other thing is when you look at games like early games, when you look at the Clippers and the Mavs, for example, that's a 12:30 start in LA. And when you look at, the Sixers and the Hawks, that was like a 1:00 start game in Philadelphia. Some players like to play evening games more than they like to play afternoon games.
There can be different opinions, which do you prefer, and how we can see it as a big picture inside.
Sure, but I also think that when you look at those evening games, like a game like today, if the game you look at game 7 for the Clippers versus and the Mavs versus game 6 for the Clippers and Mavs. You look at this, game 6 was Friday. You got to fly back to LA. You got to get into your hotel. You figure if you flew to LA after the game, you get in around, a certain amount of time, you getting rest, you're getting food, you're getting up the next day, you're going to walkthroughs and practices and media obligations. And then today, the difference between Dallas time and LA time is about 2 hours. You start a game at 12:30 on a Sunday. Comparatively, when you look at the Sixers,
my gosh.
Yeah, comparatively when you look at the Sixers again, and you look at the Hawks, they've had quite a amount of time off, as did the Sixers. The Sixers they finished their series Monday against the Wizards, they would have had more time to kind of rest. Embiid got hurt the next game. So it's kind of like you look at all of those different what ifs and things of that sort. You put that onto a pot, you look at video, you rest, you pray, you meditate, you do what you need to do. I think that this series will be fine. I think as the Mavericks and the Clippers series showed you, people thought the Clippers were down and out, and they made it all the way to a game 7. So I think one game won't make a difference for the Sixers and the Hawks. I think this will be a pretty superfluous series, and it can go either way. I have no dog in the fight, but I think that those are two teams that are worth the price of admission, and I'm excited to see round 2.
Exactly, because either way, even if the Nets finish off their series against the Milwaukee Bucks, they're going to be in for a tough Eastern Conference Finals. You're going to be facing an upset rising team like the Atlanta Hawks or a predictable number 1 seed you beat down from the 76ers on your way towards a possible finals matchup against any of the 4 remaining opponents for the Western Conference. And we transitioned into the Nuggets and Suns series. Who do you have winning that one?
Oh, this is like
the Nuggets.
Big one. Really huge
The
one.
Nuggets.
I'm like, there can be like, let's take it into the big picture for the Nuggets. They're led by Nikola Jokic, like AKA the Joker. He was one of the contenders for the MVP award this season. And then for the Suns, they have this backcourt that has Devin Booker and Chris Paul. So if you and add in DeAndre Ayton to that as well. If you see Nikola Jokic versus DeAndre Ayton, like the big matchup, like the forward matchup, it's going to be like an interesting one to see. Could this be like either a Nuggets sweep or a Sun sweep? Or I don't know, could it last up to 7 games? We'll just wait and see. So I don't know who should win for me. It's going to be like an interesting one.
There you go.
Yeah.
Last season for the Nuggets, like they were in the bubble and they qualified for the playoffs. And then for the Suns, they had an 8-0 bubble record, and then they just missed the playoffs due to the tiebreaker situation. And then they just acquired Chris Paul, so it's going to be like an interesting series to see.
Chris Paul was definitely the difference maker for Phoenix this year, as well as Jake Crowder, Cam Payne, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, and also I think what gets lost in translation also was the growth of DeAndre Ayton, who I think can be a top 5 big going into the season next season. So yeah, lot to dissect there, but I think Denver has done it well without Jamal Murray. They are a complete roster in a way that reminds me so much of the Clippers. They're a complete roster. As well as the Nets. I have the Bucks. I have the Nuggets in that series.
That's true. I mean, to be fair, I like that you picked the Denver Nuggets because that's a good pick, but I'm giving it to Phoenix in 7. I have to.
I'm giving it to Phoenix as well. Sorry.
It's all good.
Let me just bring up on how the Denver Nuggets had a rough start to the season. They were like missing Jeremy Grant and like due to like free agency losses. In that the off season, they had a departure of Torrey Craig and Jeremy Grant, and they dealt with a lot like in the beginning of the series, and then they began to turn it around, and then they ended up in the 3rd seed of the Western Conference, and then that is led by Nikola Jokic, which is like a pretty like an interesting roster, like how they turned around from the rough start to like finishing in the top 3 of the Western Conference for the Denver Nuggets.
That's also true. And you know what? It's looking like the Los Angeles Clippers are going to get past the Dallas Mavericks as they're leading by like 17 points with 8:14 left.
By almost 20.
Yeah. If the Clippers do end up being the one to go into the second round to face the Jazz, do you see them getting past the Jazz in the second round, Brandon?
It's going to be interesting. I think they can. I think they have the personality.
I think they can as well. They have Kawhi. They have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So Kawhi Leonard came out hungry in Game 6, and so did Game 7, he is the leading scorer for the Clippers. So anything can happen in between the Jazz and the Clippers. So could they last to 5 or 6 games? What could happen in this series? That is like a big question.
You're on it, my sister. You were on it.
Yeah. Bigger question is, what could happen for the rest of the playoffs? Will Brooklyn live up to that championship or bust situation that ESPN been talking about for months? Or will we see a new champion that's never won it before? The 5 teams remaining, or 4 teams remaining actually, because the Mavericks might be eliminated after this episode, get a deep run. All questions will be answered in a later episode. Now, on to some WNBA talk. I know you've been watching what's been going on in WNBA between Kim, the game winner off the Chicago Sky, Sabrina Ionescu, a game winner off the Indiana Fever, who currently owns the worst record in the WNBA. And also, at the game I went to at the Barclays Center, I see Courtney Williams in a game winner off the Liberty in overtime. So there's so much to dissect in a short period of time. Like, what are your most impressions about the WNBA season up until this point, Aya?
One of the big questions is for the Indiana Fever, how did they start the season 1-9 when they have Jessica Breland, Lauren Cox, and Kelsey Mitchell? And although they have a lot of young pieces inside the roster, and then Marianne Stanley as the head coach for the second season, and Tamika Catchings as the general manager. And then let me just think about how Kaiser Gondrezic is the 4th pick. How would she make an impact for this Fever team? And then how are they 1-9 through the first games? And then how would they get blown out? Which is which just surprises me in this, because the Fever lost Candice Dupree, Erica Wheeler, and Natalie Achanwa to free agency this past off season, and they gained Danielle Robinson, Jantel Lavender, and Jessica Breland as their veteran additions. I'm questioning, how would this Fever team, how can they turn it around? Or otherwise they could get into another lottery again, hoping for the first pick. And then for the Phoenix Mercury, they just lost Diana Taurasi to a sternum injury, which could last for at least 4 weeks. The Mercury won 3-1 without her, based on the close matchups between the Sky and then the Dallas Wings. The Sky twice. I'm really surprised how they won over the Sky team without Candace Parker. And then transitioning to the Sky, they lost 7 straight games without Candace Parker, and then Candace Parker, she could be back in Wednesday's game versus the Fever. Let me just point out, for the Fever versus Sky, which is this Wednesday, which team, I'm questioning which team could win. I am just really curious about these 2 teams, because I know that they're both having a rough start to the season. The Sky are dealing with the injuries of Candace Parker, which she could be back on Wednesday. I have a lot of big questions for this Sky. How could they turn it around to becoming one of the contenders for the WNBA? How could the Fever fix this mistake, and then could they start over again?
Yeah, you got a very interesting point. And to get back to Chicago Sky, if Candace Parker does play this week, they're going to blow Indiana out of the water like every other team has.
Yes.
If Candace Parker play. And I know you see how good Candace Parker is as an analyst for NBA on TNT Tuesdays. She has been torn it up. Brendan, what are your thoughts on the way the WNBA season started?
I'll be honest with you. I have been so focused on the playoff, the NBA playoffs. I have not started watching WNBA. I usually start watching the WNBA during the playoffs, kind of like a lot of people start watching the NBA playoffs or baseball during the playoffs. I do know that I have been watching clips of games on Instagram. I saw Liz Cambage hitting fadeaways and grinning while she was doing it, looking like Hines Ward while he was catching footballs in the end zone. But I have no problem with the WNBA. In fact, I've always enjoyed watching the WNBA after the NBA season is over, particularly because I just love basketball. But I think because the NBA playoffs are intersecting with the WNBA's normal start time, with me, transitioning to my new job, I have not had any extra space to watch WNBA yet, but I will likely be watching it come late summer, come fall, when the finals and the playoffs are in full swing.
And that's totally understandable, because even I'm kind of like that first. But now that I think about it, as a basketball head, you can squeeze in the WNBA and the NBA at the same time, like how we did last year with the NBA Finals and the WNBA Finals happening around the same time in 2020. And you could thank COVID for that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the biggest.
That.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference maker. I honestly have not watched it. It's because I am so focused on playoffs and just scheduling. But once the NBA season is over, and the playoffs and the finals and things of that sort, and in between Olympics and WNBA, I definitely will find some time to watch it. And then
there's too much basketball to tie in this summer.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I was just gonna point out for the NBA fans that are like missing basketball when it's the off season, why not watch the WNBA?
Well, yeah, that's what I do.
The NBA is to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
How vital it is to see how a woman is making an impact for sports in the last few years, and how they're making their voices, and how they can bring awareness to the fans, and how they can like increase the fans and viewership. Like for last season, like when we saw, like for last season and this season, when we saw the increase on viewership, which is like really huge for the WNBA, and especially for Commissioner Kathleen Engelbert making an impact for that. So I really like seeing how the WNBA is making a significant change in the last few years with fans and viewership, and how they can like solve the problems like from the past.
That is also true. And well, the WNBA is pretty much the true advertising, because you see so many crazy games going on so many crazy moments, so many good performances. And oh yeah, you also saw Sabrina Ionescu get a triple-double.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I know you're happy about that.
I'm like really happy for Sabrina Ionescu being able to play on the court again after this really bad injury that I saw last year on the ankle. I know it was really heartbreaking for Sabrina to suffer her ankle injury, and she was supposed to win the Rookie of the Year award last year in the bubble, and then now she's back better than ever this year, making a huge impact for the Liberty, and I cannot wait to see her next Sunday in person.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Too bad she only had to combine like 15 points over the last 3 games during this losing streak that they're currently on. But are you buying or selling the New York Liberty being 5-4 to start the season, Aya?
What do you say?
Are you buying the Liberty start of the season?
So it's pretty interesting to see how the Liberty added in Sammy Whitcomb, Sabrina Ionescu to the starting lineup, and especially a contending Rookie of the Year like Michaela Oniwari, who is contending for Rookie of the Year award. This is like a pretty cool New York team to watch, despite losing Natasha Howard to an injury, she is expected to be out 4 to 6 weeks. But despite that, they're managing to get through the games by fighting hard and being aggressive on both ends, which is like pretty interesting. I like seeing this Liberty team, honestly.
Yeah, I can see New York Liberty getting better. I mean, the losing streak only happened because you're facing tougher competition. Like, think about it. Well, the Dream, they're gonna come back. They were on a hot streak, and Liberty were on a 4 days rest, so that was excusable. Not to mention they had another 5-day rest before having to take on Asia Wilson and the Las Vegas Aces, who was running up the final last year. And they got blown out of the water in last year's finals. But back to the present. And then there's also the series game against the Connecticut Sun last night. They also got blown out of the water. But what you expect? Connecticut Sun's literally undefeated at home with their 2 overtime losses. Well, the Seattle Storm is excusable, but Minnesota really.
They have Sylvia Fowles, like the all-time leading rebounder in the WNBA.
Also
so,
true. Let's go into that game.
I have a feeling that Sylvia Fowles, she would be a monster in that game alongside Damiris Dantas. Damiris Dantas, for the Minnesota Lynx, she's been making a great impact for this Lynx team since arrival in 2019. Not to mention the fact that the Lynx had Dantas before they traded her away a few years ago. And they are pretty sure glad to have her back again.
Yes. That's also true. And I kind of see the Minnesota Lynx turn things around. I mean, they're coming up a decade where they made 6 finals appearances within the span of 10 years, which is just as good as the San Antonio Spurs in the 2000s and the first half of 2010s. It's up until 2014, of course. I mean, you can't, even though they kind of got to a bad start, they are starting to pick it up now after wins against the Atlanta Dream and the Connecticut Sun. So it's not too big of a deal. Not to mention, you're being led by Sylvia Fowles, who's won so many championships for that Minnesota Lynx roster. So they like the San Antonio Spurs of the WNBA.
Oh, wow.
Especially a league where you got to see Brittany Griner. They came back to the Phoenix Mercury. Were your impressions about Brittany Griner pulled up 2 dunks?
Wow. When I saw Brittany Griner pulling up 2 dunks, which is pretty cool. You know what? Brittany Griner is back better than ever, everyone. She is. And I think that she should be in a conversation for a Comeback Player of the Year award for the W. And I mean, I know that she brings in the energy, and she's been improving on rebounding in the last few years, which is I'm really impressed to see her grow on both ends. So I can see her winning Comeback Player of the Year, and I wonder how things will be going for this Mercury team. If they get Diana Taurasi back, watch out. And so does Bria Hartley.
Yeah, Phoenix Mercury, they're going to be dangerous. At least the Liberty won't have to worry about them when they play in later this week. Yeah, it's just a lot of stuff can happen in the basketball world right now, whether it's in the NBA or the W. A lot is just, it's hard to digest. Oh yeah, there's also the fact that the Seattle Storm will take on the Connecticut Sun. And I spoke to Brianna Jones about that matchup. She said that she feels that she has straightened out all the mistakes when they lost to them in Seattle in overtime. So but they expect Seattle to come back hard and try to end their undefeated streak in Connecticut, especially after Jewel Lloyd hit that crazy 3-point shot in overtime over the Dallas Wings. What are your impressions about that, Aya?
I think the way Jewel Lloyd has been using her mentality since entering the WNBA as the first pick in the 2015 draft, I love her. See her energy and how she's been one of the 3 leaders for the Seattle Storm, making a great influence. I'm really impressed with the way Jewel Lloyd has been making an influence for this team, for the Storm team, and especially leading them to 2 championships in even years, 2018, 2020, respectively. So I love seeing Jewel Lloyd, and she should be a contender for MVP award for sure. When should she become one?
Don't be surprised if we see a Seattle Storm weather the storm all the way to the WNBA championship.
Despite losing Natasha Howard and Alicia Clark, they made huge adjustments to this team. And then they brought in Noel Quinn as a new head coach after Dan Hughes announcing his retirement from coaching the WNBA. I like seeing what's going on in the Seattle Storm. Good things are going through for them.
Exactly. And now wrap up this episode, Nothing But That Sports Talk. Thank you for stopping by, Brandon and Aya. I really appreciate you coming on to talk NBA and sitting through the WNBA discussion. Really appreciate it. And to all the ballers out there, New York, we here.
Yep.